We are in the act of connecting dots across the globe, a community of researchers who foster collaborations and conversations amongst its members at various points. We are African PhD Scholars Network. Connect to a community of scholars to get experts' advice, support, and resources in different fields of study needed to enhance your PhD journey. African PhD Scholars Network. We start and end the journey with you.
Hello, good morning, and welcome to today's event. This is the African PhD Scholars Network, and it's lovely to be here with you this lovely morning, afternoon. My name is Genevieve Bosa, and I'm the convener of this event, and it's absolutely amazing to have you here. This is the second event in the series that we're having, and we will be talking today about your research idea, interviews, and would also be considering a few more thoughts. Well, we've named this event the Opportunity Series, and this is the Opportunity Series 2.0. Now, as part of the introduction, I will just slightly mention a few housekeeping rules. Please post your questions in the chat. We'll be taking questions in the chat, but we'll also have opportunities for you to, ask your questions, unmute and ask your questions. Brief introduction about the network. So we exist here as a community to help you on your PhD journey. It's our desire to demystify the PhD journey for you and to ensure that as you undergo this journey at different stages in your PhD work, that you have the support, that you have a community, that you're able to collaborate with other people, and that you do not feel you're doing this alone. So we're here to work with you. We're here to help answer questions. You can meet with anyone, email them, we'll post their LinkedIn pages, profiles for you to also participate with them. The last program we had major takeaways: how to spot funded opportunities, how to prepare your proposal, how to choose your research topic, how to approach supervisors. We'll just touch a few on that today. But today in particular, we will be considering your PhD journey. But before I continue with that, I would like to introduce the speakers, the panelists that are on the call with me today. I see that Dr. Nenadi has joined us. Can you add her to the pin, please? So I will start with Dr. Adeyinka Adewale. Welcome, Dr. Adeyinka. He's an associate professor of leadership ethics and entrepreneurship at the University of Reading. He's also the Deputy Director of Studies in the Department of Leadership, Organization and Behavior at Henley Business School. He's a consultant, he's a coach, he's a teacher, and we're privileged to have him today. So thank you very much and welcome. We'll post all their profile links for you so you can follow them, ask questions, and also follow the network. We also have with us Dr. Emmanuel Mogaji. Dr. Emmanuel is a senior lecturer at the University of Greenwich in Advertising and Marketing Communications. Emmanuel is an author of 2 academic textbooks, amazing, and I think we can post the links to them as well, on branding and advertising. He's published and peer-reviewed journal articles, book chapters, books, and has presented at national and international conferences. So it's lovely to be here with Dr. Emmanuel, and I've written a few books with him and journal articles. Absolutely amazing. Thank you very much for being here and for your time. We also have Dr. Kingsley Udofa. Dr. Kingsley is a lecturer at Sheffield Hallam University. He's a lawyer and a legal practitioner in Nigeria and in the UK. So if you have any issues in both countries, yeah, we know who to call. He teaches taught law and refugee rights to undergraduate law students. Dr. Kingsley is very vocal about politics on Twitter. Yes, and he's been trying to get us all involved in politics. Well, his research mainly investigates the intersection of law and technology, and also commercial transactions, human rights, and private claims. So it's lovely to have him here with us. Thank you for your time, and thank you for being here. We also have Dr. Nenadi Adamu. Thank you for being here today. Dr. Nenadi is a senior lecturer in applied social sciences, and she's the course coordinator for health and social care. She would also be the course coordinator for the MSc Integrated Healthcare Practice and Strategic Leadership from September. She's a senior fellow of the UK Higher Education, and it's a privilege to have her here with us. Thank you, Dr. Nenadi, for being here with us. Well, my profile, I'm sure somebody from the team will post it, so we can just jump right into it so that I don't take all the time, just talking about myself. So today, we are discussing, we'll start with understanding what a research gap is. And if you've been following us on Instagram, LinkedIn, we just started with a little teaser on your research gap, and I know that when you read, books, topics about your interest, you may realize that, this is something I want to do. But I think we want to start with, why is it important for prospective researchers to identify a unique research gap? Why is that? Why is it even an issue? Let's start from there. Because if we don't seem to understand what a research gap or a literature gap is, then it's like the bedrock of our research idea or research topic becomes faulty. So now my question to the panelists, why is it important for us to identify this unique research idea? Who will bell the cat?
Dr. Nenadi.
Okay, good morning. If Emmanuel has nominated me, he's my boss. I have no option.
There we go.
What to respond. Good morning. Oh, sorry. Good afternoon, everyone. So I need to start with the provisor. I'm currently in America with 4 children. So 2 of mine and my niece and nephew visiting my parents. So just in case they're still asleep, thank you, Lord, just in case chaos erupts soon, please bear with me. And for some reason, my earbuds don't seem to be picking up. So there might be some background noise. So yeah, I was hoping actually that one of the other panelists will pick up this question when I read through the list, because and then my response will be the additional response, because you may have picked up from the bio of everyone here on the panel. They're very, very accomplished researchers and kind of know their business. I'm the social scientist, and that's really crucial, because for social sciences, while they talk about research gaps, what I think the crucial point is identifying a research angle, because it's almost impossible to come up with a new idea, a brand new idea. So for social sciences, what I say to someone who's interested, for example, in researching the impact of health inequalities on in organizations or particular groups, you will find at least 1,000. If you do a search, you will find hundreds of thousands of positions of research that have been done on a particular issue. And then you might think, well, this is something I'm interested in. There's clearly no gap here because it's all been said. So going beyond that, because we're not scientific where there's a new discovery, going beyond that is trying to find out, what angle can I bring into this? Or what perspective have I lost or have I not found going through the literature, going through existing literature? And that's why the literature review process is quite crucial. You need to read. Sometimes you're not, obviously, if you're going for a PhD, you realize you're not reading the entire article, but you need to scan read it. I say with caution, but hundreds of studies around your issue, particularly in the social sciences, to find out the angle that's missing. And I use this example for my undergrads. This may not really be relevant for PhD level, but I say, look at something that hasn't been said. I have an example where a student of mine was trying to write about postpartum depression. And so she was doing her literature review. She'd had a question, she was searching, and she found that not many talked about the experiences, particularly of asylum seekers in the UK. So although there was a little bit of, they might mention it or there might be an allusion to it, there wasn't much that had been done about it. So you see, it's not a research gap in that traditional way of looking at things, but it's an angle that hasn't quite been explored. And that is crucial. I say for students who are coming from in an international perspective, one very easy way to find a new angle is to research a new area in the global south, particularly, that hasn't been looked at. Dr. Emmanuel and I will remember very fondly one of our colleagues on the PhD who came from Saudi Arabia. And it was like everything she found out, she had a whole prof on her examination team, and every comment was like, oh, how interesting, because they didn't know. They knew Jack. I kind of helped her because her English, nearly write the whole thing, just and every comment from this pro, I saw major gaps in her work. I thought she'll get a year. She got 3 months corrections, because to them, it was a novel idea. No one had researched it. Saudi Arabia is quite close. It's closed to even academia. They actually regulate the kind of information that comes out. And she was researching around, social worker, around children. It's quite a sensitive area. So everything she found was actually interesting. So that's another angle, I would say. Look for an angle, look for a group that hasn't been really explored. Don't beat yourself up thinking, I have to have this new idea that no one else has thought about, or I have to do grounded theory, I have to bring a new theory from ground up that no one else has theorized, because that's what a PhD is about. Look for an angle.
I see there's some hands. Thank you very much, Dr. Nenadi. We'll look for this angle, like very, very important. And I think the main thing, before I hand over to Dr. Kingsley, don't try to do something new. Like, again, I had that. My PhD supervisor was saying, narrow it down. Yeah. Narrow it down, your broad idea, you want to change the world, narrow it down. So Dr. Kingsley, and then I'll bring in Dr. Yinka.
Thank you. I thought I'd get my own opinion out before it gets crowded. Pardon me. I think in addition to what Dr. Nenadi has said, I think the research gap is really about the perspective that you bring to knowledge. And actually, there's a million perspectives, irrespective of the fact that research has already been done. So my PhD, for instance, was about crypto, and I had to take a very unique perspective to crypto. So you can always take a perspective. It could be a philosophical perspective. It could be a personal, it could be a geographic perspective. As long as you sort of bring a new way of looking at that topic, I think that's what counts. But to answer your question specifically,
what perspective did you bring to crypto? No.
Crypto was new when I started it, so okay. I was the perspective, if that makes any sense. Right. Because so that was new. But to answer your question, why is it important to identify a unique research gap? I think ultimately, after you finish that research process, the examination will be about contribution to knowledge. So actually, before you start the journey, perhaps you should figure out what unique area you will take, so that when you get to the end, you can then demonstrate that here's my contribution to knowledge, here's my new frontier. So it's almost like looking backward. Okay, ultimately at the end of the PhD, I'll be asked, what is your contribution? So I might as well start by thinking about what that contribution will be at the beginning. So I think it's essential, when you start out that PhD, you think about what is maybe not necessarily new, but what is the gap? So when you get to the end, you can say, I think my example is very similar to the example that Nena gave. Crypto, when I started in 2016, nobody ever heard of Bitcoin. My supervisor didn't have a clue. So basically, I was the expert. Even in the department, I was leading all the discussions on crypto as a PhD student. And at the end, it didn't matter whether the work was, it was good. It was in like top of the range. But it didn't really matter because everything I said was new. Everything I said was fresh. And so at the beginning, I set out that this is going to be my contribution. And I was having a discussion with some colleagues yesterday, and we're exploring, regulating some of this metaverse thing, this new stuff with Facebook. And the young lady who is also thinking of doing a PhD asked, well, is this really new? Is this a contribution? And we said to her, well, it doesn't matter. You might do the research and find that this is not worth researching. That's new. That's a contribution. So it's figuring out from the beginning what will be my contribution, and then sort of working your way backwards and building that research around that. So that's, I guess, my contribution. Let's say one more thing before Emmanuel says it. I have a feeling Emmanuel will say it.
Why are you preempting?
He's my boss, so I always have to look for his trouble.
Manu, how many people are you their bosses? Okay, sorry.
I think another important thing with picking out a unique research gap is you can make the research your own. And that can then that will then help you in terms of when it gets lonely and when it gets difficult. Because if you take a perspective that you choose, then in a way you're more committed to it, and that may sustain you when it gets a bit boring and when it gets a bit lonely. So I would say those 3 points. First, the fact that it is crucial at the end, but also the fact that perhaps you might get attached to the uniqueness of that topic, and that interest or that attachment could sustain you through the process. So that's my answer. Emmanuel, you can go now.
Dr. Adeyinka, you said Dr. Adeyinka will go first.
Okay, let's. Okay, so see, choose. You can see what happens in academia.
Okay, let me go then we can reserve it for Dr. Adeyinka to finish it off from there. Yes. I would not say what Dr. Kingsley and Dr. Nenadia said, but I think one thing I want to bring here is competition. You can imagine that there are many, like you said, Dr. Kingsley, there are millions of ideas. But the point is you want to look at, out of these millions, which one will really give me that edge? And that's something I try to talk to students about. Like, okay, for example, I want to do a research about Nigeria's automobile, this and that. But looking at the global scale of things, what's the value of what I'm thinking about? So I think here you want to separate your own personal your personal interest from, like what Dr. Nanadia said, what is out there in the literature. So hopefully, if you can balance it up between the novel thing like the crypto from a different perspective, but you still feel it's really important, because there are many ideas and there's this competition for space, competition for supervisors. So imagine supervisor is looking at let's say even hundreds of ideas. For each of those 100 students, that is their own best. That is their own, this will heal the world. But remember, there's somebody at the end of the table who is having this bigger overview of really knowing what are those things that are emerging, what are those things that are important, what are those things that we have read or something that is still new. So for prospective PhD students, I will expect you to be very critical about that gap. You can have about 20, 30 gap, but again, be critical with yourself. You are in a competition, you want to put your best foot forward, and you don't know what other people are doing. You don't know if they're actually looking for cure to cancer. You don't know how big their own is. So you want to be mindful of your own personal interest, what I like to do, what I like to research, and thinking about how does this fit into the grand scheme of things? How does it fit into what the world is talking about right now? And secondly, you want to jump on opportunities. For example, when I did my own PhD was 2008, there was this financial crisis and banks were really trying to change their own adverts. And that was when I thought, this is something, I think it's also aligns with what Dr. Kingsley is saying. When something is actually still new, it's easier for you to come on board and do it. But the point is, hopefully you will do it in that time frame before somebody with a stronger power and stronger network comes again and finish it up. But notwithstanding, it's about you recognizing the competition in terms of what people want to research about, recognizing the timing. And now I wouldn't be surprised. Many people might be doing PhD on COVID and metaverse. Those are the two things, at least maybe from marketing, that I'm really seeing, COVID and metaverse. But also, why is it important? What is the value of this? If you are still researching COVID, be mindful, COVID is gone. We are used to COVID. You want to be mindful of creating the value in it. Like, okay, it's there, it's done, but this is something new I'm bringing about. So to round up my point, recognize the competition in terms of the supervisors that are available, in terms of what other people are doing, recognizing the opportunities. You don't know if something fresh coming on board, emerging from the horizon, who knows, it could be very important. And number three is to recognize the value, okay? You are going to be on this journey for 3 years. I hope by the end of that, your 3 years, when they're asking you, what's your contribution is still valid. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Competition. See, it's brought in a different angle to it. So yes, because you need to think about how this research gap, how this idea is going to compete in the real world, you know. Okay, let's bring in Dr. Adeyinka.
Okay, morning everyone, and thanks for having me. Great insights by all the panelists so far. Maybe just a few things I'm going to touch up on that building up on what everyone has said. Maybe I should start from a more practical level or a practical note, which will help a lot of the aspiring PhD students on this call. The best way to get a snapshot of the evolution of the trends in whatever subject or whatever topic you're interested in is to find review articles. There must be usually one person, if it is not a new field, and I'm going to come to that in a minute. Review articles do a fantastic job of giving you snapshots of evolution in the development of the knowledge of that field. You tend to have review articles for fields of studies that may have been in where people have been actively doing research for at least 5 years. So when you find the first review article, it usually cover a chunk of time. And in that chunk of time, you could have a meta-analytic sort of analysis of what's been done in the field, what methodologies have been predominantly deployed, in what context, what are the conceptualizations of that particular thing, what other sort of general sort of things do we know. And most of those review articles also tend to do a great job of trying to lead us to where knowledge should be heading based on what we currently know. And where knowledge should be heading is one of your first keys to understanding where the gaps are at the moment. So you will get what you call things like recommendations for further studies. Those recommendations for further studies are your invitation to engagement with that field of knowledge in order to find your own particular niche of where things are going. So there is where knowledge has been, and there is where knowledge should be heading. And what you need, because of the volume of data out there, volume of studies out there, if it is a well-researched sort of area of endeavor, what could help you synthesize is to find review articles. Even with review articles, you need to be a bit critical, but at least they give you a better sort of it's like an encyclopedia of what's been going on in that field. It gives you a bit more of getting a lot of information from one spot rather than you having to do all that job yourself. So that's what review articles do. So that's the fundamental and perhaps one of the most practical recommendations I would give to you if you want to sort of begin to engage in a particular field of endeavor. That's number one. Number two is that, again, building up on the great insights from my colleagues, there is, you keep hearing contributions, and contributions, which is fantastic. But we need to be careful. There is what I call the sufficiency of contribution. If you're going to do a PhD, you are going to be tested on the sufficiency of your contribution. Have you made a strong enough contribution? Now, how do we measure, or how do we know what we call a strong enough contribution? Now, I was having a conversation with someone who is an external recently, and he said something to me, which, I mean, is quite exciting, but also it can be controversial. It's interesting, but I absolutely agree with him, because I mean, being someone who is actively supervising a lot of PhDs, I can see where he's coming from. He said something to me. He said, gone are the days where just saying, oh, I did this research in a new context is sufficient contribution. It could be, but boy, you have to make sure you tease out what exactly that context brings to the equation that we don't know. And I dare say that perhaps it is teasing out what that context brings and what contribution that context will give us in terms of extending our knowledge of theory. Very critical. So just merely saying, I did it in Saudi Arabia, which is a fantastically unique context, is never going to be sufficient anymore for most PhDs. So you need to do a bit more. And so that's really part of the conversations that we're currently having, even in high-level discussions amongst external examiners, of walking into an external examination, a viva, and what you're seeing is just someone who has built their entire knowledge contribution around the fact that I'm doing this in Africa. I mean, they're saying, so what? So what about Africa? So you need to do, I'm not saying that you won't be able to cross the PhD hurdle by doing it in a new context. I'm saying that using your new context as a crutch is not going to be enough. There has to be more technical teasing out that makes that context. You need to sell that context and make sure that you make it clear what uniqueness that context is bringing to a phenomenon, and how that then makes contributions to theory or extend theory. That's another, critical point. The other point that I wanted to mention, or I mentioned it in passing, I think it was Dr. Emmanuel who was talking about it, was when Kingsley was speaking and Dr. Nenandi was speaking. There are three things I just want to also highlight. In every PhD field, you have timing, development, and evolution. You want to be very careful. Dr. Emmanuel was talking about jumping on the bandwagon of a particular knowledge field. In fact, I find those to be trickier and more dangerous, even though they are more exciting. So with every PhD field, as it is in the world of finance, high risk, high reward. If you're able to get that research done, new field, in record time, and you become the first person to dump that body of knowledge, you become the cited authority before other people jump to the bandwagon. But remember, you have a 3-year journey, and that's where evolution comes in. When Dr. Kingsley was doing his work on crypto in 2016 to 2019, 2020, nobody was still talking about crypto as at 2019. Not few people were talking, let me not say nobody, few people were talking about crypto in 2019. It was just in that 2019 that the whole world began to say, what's this new thing that is, shaking our world? By then, Dr. Kingsley was just about to hand in his thesis. If you try that with COVID, and you want to build your contribution around COVID, I'm not saying you still can't. We're trying to be very careful here. I'm not trying to discourage anybody, because these things we're saying, we're not saying it as blanket statements. We're just trying to give you insights into how to be careful with how you position yourself, how you position the value proposition of your work. If you want to do anything COVID related at this point in time, you would agree with me that it's now a saturated marketplace. Everybody has done stuff on COVID. So you need to do a harder job of selling yourself enough. So there is the evolution of knowledge you need to pay attention to, and the timing of that particular research, which is very critical. And that's another thing. And so one more thing from me before I hand over back to you all is that I know that we have people from different sort of fields of study here. We have people in the pure sciences, and that's, I want you to mark Dr. Nenandi's comments earlier. She did qualify what she said by saying at least in social sciences. It's a critical demarcation. Now, in the realms of pure sciences, that is purely experiment driven, like the Josephine, who is in nutrition, and people who may be doing pure lab work, if that's what your research would entail. The whole argument around innovation and invention is one that we know. Am I inventing a totally new type of knowledge, or am I innovating on the basis of, what currently exists? And of course, even people would argue that at times, even with invention, you need a little bit of, stepping up on some of the things that others have done in order to invent or emerge. But nonetheless, the point I'm trying to make is that even though, the point has been made, that don't put yourself under pressure of trying to build something entirely new. Like Genevieve said, I'm trying to save the world. In the realms of sciences, it might be a possibility if you're trying to do some work that you could, through 3 years of lab research, prove something totally novel that we know very little or nothing about whatsoever. And I know that these things sort of, vary according to the field of endeavor. But what matters is like one of my very good musician friends who also did some work with some of the A-listers you have today, once said to me, he said, you don't improvise on nothing. So what he's saying, in other words, is that improvisation, innovation has to emerge from what currently exists, which is why you need to do a lot of work to ground your work in what currently is happening in the field. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Like, I was even writing, even though I finished, and I'm, but it was very interesting because it's not just for your PhD, but for journal articles as well. That's also one thing we want to encourage you. Don't just say, okay, I want to focus on just this. You will have to write, you will have to present papers, and the sufficiency of, contribution, very important. Is it sufficient? Are you just saying, have I considered the different arguments? No, there's a lot more. Now, I don't want us to feel, I see your hand, Dr. Emmanuel. I don't want you to feel slightly overwhelmed, because I know that it may feel like we're dealing with a lot of information. There will be more information on the network for you to go through this, but these are very helpful in thinking through your thoughts, in thinking through what you want to do. My suggestion to you, I hope you're taking notes. I hope you're writing these things down. I hope you're organizing them. I hope you're thinking through what the panelists are saying. What is the significance of this research? What is the argument? Does this need more clarification? Is this contribution sufficient? What other factors can influence my results? Are you writing down? It's very helpful. You would need this as we continue. Dr. Emmanuel, did you want to?
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to buttress what Dr. Adenka said about that contextualization, and I think it's even more important now. It aligns back to my idea of competition. Everybody now knows about Africa. So the point is, if you are still saying, oh, I'm contextualizing this study in Africa, okay, again, it brings that extra layer that you need to really dig deep. You can bear me witness, Dr. Genevieve doing something around disability, Lagos, Nigeria. There was that question about, and so what's so unique about this context of Nigeria that you are talking about that we need to pay attention? So people now know about Africa. People now, come on, this is 2022. People now know about us. So the point is, it brings that extra challenge to dig deep and to contextualize it. But on the other side, I think I want to recognize the challenge. For example, I do study on Nigeria, and it's easier for me to contextualize it in Nigeria. I like Nigeria is the biggest country, is this and this. But spare some thought for a country like Togo. What would you want to say about Togo compared to Nigeria? But again, that doesn't mean there's nothing in Togo. And so when I mean Togo, I just mean maybe a smaller country. You can't say it's the biggest country, so therefore you can't say it's got the largest economy. You can't say it's got that. But that's something we all need to reflect on, saying, even though I'm working in a small context, in a small country, there should still be something that makes that information unique for the rest of the world? If not, why are you doing this? So contextualization could be very tricky, especially if you are in a very, a different area. But that is why you want to contribute and bring something new. It might be a challenge, but I'm sure if you're able to identify that context and discuss it, I think that's also what I would like to iterate what Dr. Adeka is saying. That discussion telling us, okay, I've not heard about Syria. I'm reading your work. I should be able to see myself in Syria and understand why this is different from everything I've been reading. So the contextualization is important, and also with the competition, the amount of information that is out there. Come on, you need to do extra. You can imagine those who did PhD in 1960, like they can just open their laptop and open their typewriter and do anything. It's still new. But this is 2020. There's still a lot of things out there to be researched, but you might need to dig deeper.
So let's dig deeper. Hold on, don't mute. Let's dig deeper with you. You said something. Yeah, you said something. We wrote a paper about disability, and one of the reviewers came back and said, so what? Because we talked about Nigeria. Now let's dig deeper. How do we, because we're telling people, yeah, contextualize. So how were we able, you're answering, I'm not answering, I'm asking the question. How were we able to contextualize that and give them the so what? What did we do that made it unique, and that it was not just, okay, it's Nigeria. What more? Because I want people to start to process and think, okay, yes, it's not just about, yes, I'm doing this in Nigeria. What more? Give me an example of contextualization.
Yes. An example of contextualization here would be you comparing it to what we already know. For example, they might be saying, yes, what's so special about Nigeria? First of all, you need to recognize that Nigeria has got its own informal economy, which will affect people's access to cash and technology. So some people might think, oh, you can just go to the cash machine, you can go to the train station and tap your card and go in. So that is the whole idea, but you need to really explain what's Nigeria all about in terms of the informal economy. Not many people have access to the card, so people still rely on their cash. Therefore, if you want to pay your taxi, your driver, you might need to get involved in cash. You don't really have access to that app. Also, what we were talking about, the physical infrastructure. Many people just think Nigeria or Africa generally is just one country. So that is why you also want to recognize, okay, we know that these things exist, but in Nigeria is a different case, and this is something we need to recognize. Another point that I was trying to use, that I used in one of the paper, was about weather. We are talking about walking, and they were like, yes, people walk in the UK, but again, in terms of the contextualization, UK sun for summer is average to really hot weather in Nigeria. So when you're saying people are working already, what is new about this? You want to contextualize and really explain that, okay, then I have to use the average temperature, saying what's the average temperature in the UK? It's about, let's say, 8 degrees, but in Nigeria it's about 26. So if you want to walk, which one is easier for you to walk? Again, this is where you really want to bring in some fact and data to let them know this is a different ball game that is happening in Africa. When you're just saying people should do this, they should do this, they should do this, based on what we have in the developed country, you want to bring it back and say, okay, we know that these things exist, but in this particular context, why this is a problem is because of perhaps the weather, is because of the limited infrastructure, is about the economy, is about the job prospects. So you want to make your own findings more understandable in the context of the country. First, I would say country, in the context of the country that you are researching. So that is why I was saying it could be a different game for people in a different country, but notwithstanding, you still need to find a way to really let people who are reading your work understand, let them see this, in quote, suffering. So I'm not saying we are suffering, but let them see that suffering and tell them, you guys are enjoying life. You think walking from a bus stop to your house is hard work. Think about those guys that need to walk kilometers, not because not because they are looking for sustainability or trying to do exercise. No, it's because of their own lack of finances for them to get transport. So we want to make sure it's contextualized in that country.
Yeah. Absolutely. No, see that's why I wanted us to dig deep. I borrowed the word from you. I see a few hands. So let's, Dr. Nadia. I don't know who was first. I'm just going because, female. Yeah.
Girl power, equality and stuff. Anyway, yeah, so just, I'm not going to take too much time. Just to reflect on, trying to contextualize and maybe give a practical suggestion if you're trying to contextualize contexts like geography, like regions that you may not really know how to. One thing you might want to do is read. I go on about reading, but honestly, personally, I found that that's quite crucial. Read what has been done. So for example, a colleague of mine and I are trying to write about mental health in Nigeria, and we're trying to do a discourse analysis of Nairaland. A few posts on Nairaland. Now, the issue with trying to contextualize Nigeria is, Nigeria has a reputation already. Research around Nigeria, if you read articles, are kind of similar. So trying to find out how to present Nigeria to this audience, because again, another serious point to make is the audience you're trying to contextualize to. Be wary about trying to please the planet in your research. Be very strategic about the audience in which you're trying to contextualize to. I'll give a joke here. I stepped in at the last minute to represent or to examine a master's viva because a professor who's Professor Jenny Pierce, she's even got an OBE for her research at our university, was unavailable. And unfortunately, this student was writing about the northeast of Nigeria. I mean, how amazing. I gladly said yes. And within the first 10 seconds, I called her bluff. The map she put up for Nigeria, for northeast, was Akwa Ibom. And then she was talking about people coming in from Cotonou, children coming in from Cotonou. She was trying to write about children in the northeast. Immediately, I started to take screenshots on my laptop. Like, I am ready for you. So the audience is important because she thought she's researched her panel. They're Oyins. She has no problem. She can just confuse them with some graphs. The picture, I searched on iPhotos. It was a stock picture from a different African country. And I said, you're putting this picture of this African country, who this is the happiness that you're alluding to is different. Their happiness is not what we call happiness and she ended up crying. She wrote, complained. She said she felt attacked. I'm quite a Margaret Thatcher. That's my reputation. But anyway, that's aside. The audience is really important to contextualize, but read about how Nigeria has been presented, what has already been said, what context has already been given, and don't try and copy. Try and then think, for what I'm trying to say, how do I need to present my context? So read about what's out there. Don't try and, because the problem is some areas are difficult to contextualize because there's too much. So how do you pick what's relevant for you? I say read about what's been said, read about what's been done, and then make your decision. Avoid trying to copy, avoid trying to say, because they've talked about the economy and because they've talked about this or the weather or this or the poverty, think about, now this is what's been said, but for my question, for my issue, how does Nigeria need to be portrayed, or how do I need to portray this issue, not just a country, for the purpose of my question? I think it's going back down each time to what you're trying to write about and making the firm links between what is needed to be known to give a good understanding of what I'm trying to present.
I feel sorry for that lady, whoever she was. Oh my goodness. But I must say that we are using Nigeria a lot. Please, I know there are people from Portugal, Zimbabwe, remember that it's contextualized. So yes, it might be one example, but always remember to contextualize, put whatever issue, whatever country in the same light, in the same vein, and always research who's on your panel, because yes, you never know. We'll come to panels at some point, but please always research. Now, there is the contextualize, but I still want us to look at, as you're contextualizing, so what? Why would I be interested? Why should I be interested in this? Yes, people are suffering. And I want us to also be careful about the fetishizing Black suffering, because it can be a way we, we bring a frame or a lens to these things. And I think, who would I bring? Let me bring Dr. Yinka in at this point. Let's see. So let's look at, yes, the savior mentality, exactly. Like, let's also be careful in the way we contextualize these things. So
thanks, Genevieve, for that. And I think that what you've just said is very critical. I know that in wanting to buy the emotions and the support of panels and reviewers, we tend to reel out all these negative statistics about Nigeria, about Africa, putting our countries down, because we think that's the only way we can provide a good basis or foundation for whatever it is we're looking to do. And if you go read any of my paper anywhere, you probably find that you won't find that kind of signature in any of my work. It's very deliberate. It's very deliberate because I believe in the uniqueness of what we have as a people, and that the uniqueness of what we have may be interpreted as negative or could be seen as a positive uniqueness. So I'll give you a good example. One of the works I did some year or two ago was around communities and communitarianism, as we call it. Is just a simple way of saying that we have a unique way of how communities are shaped and formed, and that is uniquely African. We're not saying that communities are only Africa, is only an African notion, which is another thing that I have, sort of made very clear, which impresses reviewers, is to say that, look, Japanese also have communities. British people have communities, even though we argue it's a largely individualistic sort of context where every man for themselves, but there's still a strong sense of community, or there was a strong sense of community, and there is some kind of community orientation, albeit on a reduced level. So if I come back and say that Africa, we all live in one large compound and everyone can knock on everyone's door and try to make it all look as if community is only purely an African thing, that in itself is a fallacy. What I can do, on the other hand, is to say that, look, you have your community, but we have the way our communities function. And it is the way our communities function that I want to bring to the table, which I know you don't know a lot about. It's built on the basis of humanism, and this is our own way of humanism. This is how we construct humanism. And not just that, this is how virtues are developed. This is how virtues are formed. And you begin to have those unique philosophies, like in the Yoruba philosophy, you have the Omoluabi culture, Omoluabi philosophy. You have the Ubuntu philosophy. All these things then begin to emerge from that sort. So you're beginning to show Africa in a rather positive light, in a way to say that what makes us unique is actually, they're not just all the negative stuff, they're actually things that we also bring to the table that are just uniquenesses, and they don't always have to be those reeling poverty negative statistics, which a lot of people tend to put out there. Even when you're doing, I'll give you another good example of this, is entrepreneurship. We're doing a lot of work in entrepreneurship, and I'm always the first person who is upfront in terms of when I'm doing any work on entrepreneurship to say to any review of any article, or any journal, or anybody, to say that there are two things that you'll find in every African context, or in African context. I don't like to use the phrase emerging or developing economies. I think it's derogatory, but let's just focus Nigeria or African countries. Two things you'll find: high uncertainty, limited resources. Those two things will always typify the entrepreneurship context: high uncertainty, limited resources. Now, I could begin to say that and go on a rant complaining about how policies are changing, how political instability is making it uncertain for entrepreneurs, or how politics and social politics or geopolitics is affecting the way we do businesses. I could go into all that sort of negative rant, or I could flip the coin around and say, yes, high uncertainty, limited resources, but people are surviving. How are they surviving? There is 15% survival rate for startup businesses in Africa. Those 15 make for an interesting case study for me. There is 85% that fail. We can look at the causes of failure, and shockingly, the causes of failure for those startups may not be what you think they are. You may think they are context driven, and there will be influences of context, but they may be more personal factors. But the general assumption that startup failure is attributable to the fact that you can't access government loans is actually wrong in a way, because there are 15% who are doing business and doing it successfully and may not have access to government loans. So how are they doing it? So you can then begin to say that I'm beginning to understand resilience in those sort of context of how we do business in spite and despite of all these contextual uncertainties that sort of typifies. So that is me flipping what is meant to be a negative into a positive, and to let you realize that, man, if you find an African entrepreneur who has built a business successfully in Africa, if you bring them to Europe and you give them certain levels of support, what you will get will be far greater. And let me end on one quick note. Why do you think that 93% of investment in businesses is coming from the US into Africa? Why? I was on a high-level EU-Africa trade conversation a few weeks ago, and it was happening at the European Commission in Brussels. And we had all these great ambassadors and diplomats from all over the world on there. And they, I threw it back at them and I said to them, I said, guys, Europe is Africa's largest trade partner on paper. And yet, if you look at the flow of investment into startups in Africa, Europe is less than 2% startup investment. America is probably Africa's second or third largest trade partner. I think it's second, and China is second. I think US is third. The US is Africa's third largest trade partner, yet the Americans are very smart. Go and look at all your unicorns today. Go and look at all of your unicorns in Africa across, if you look at the fintech space, whether we look at Chipo Cash, which is out of Uganda, Kenya, and Ghana, or you look at Flutterwave, or you look at all these guys, all their money has come from the US. So the thing is, why are the Americans pumping money into a context that you and I are calling rubbish on paper? We're typifying the context. Remember, we're saying it's all poverty, it's all this, and yet money is coming in. What are these people saying in your context that you are not seeing? So instead of putting your context down, there is potential that is so huge that must be characterized and carefully teased out. And I would, if there is going to be any positive narrative about Africa, it has to begin with us. We have to be the ones to begin to push out that positive narrative and start to stop this whole thing of Africa is suffering. I know we have our difficulties, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying we should ignore those, but we should also be careful how we tailor things. One last point, and I'll hand over to Pastor Genevieve. Because we've said all of this, there are two things I want to quickly mention. So what for your research proposal? You must always respect two things. Never forget what I'm about to say to you. Two things. There is what I call the mainstream literature. You must never disrespect the mainstream literature. And there is the context-specific literature. Two things, they always go in parallel. Once you begin to say, my notion is I want to do stuff in Africa, you can't say you want to do stuff in Africa by focusing on context-specific literature alone. You have to understand the mainstream literature, because if you're going to do your PhD in the UK, the chances are that your supervisor is more conversant with the mainstream literature. So your disrespect or your ignorance of the mainstream literature could become the reason why whatever research proposal you've put together becomes dead on arrival. I'll leave it there.
Thank you very much for that. That was very, very, very helpful. And it has led us nicely. I see Dr. Kingsley, your hand has been up. Should we?
Well, I think what I wanted to say has already been said. I really wanted to answer that question of so what, contextualizing, but so what? And I guess wanted to piggyback on what Emmanuel said earlier and just say one of the ways you can actually answer that so what question would be to test theory and to actually test assumptions. Because, there could be assumptions that are made. And a good example is what Dr. Adenika has just said now about, the whole poverty thing. I mean, you could then do your research, contextualize it, and then test the assumption or test the theory. That's another way to answer the so what question contextually. So I wanted to add that, but I think Emmanuel and Dr. Dink have already sort of said it already.
Oh, thank you. Now, and to follow the thread of the theory, it's very important because you may have supervisors that are not African or have never done anything African, but the thread that connects you is the theory. So that theory is very important, the respect for the theory, understanding the theory, that you don't just hinge it on context alone, but we understand what theories are important. Dr. Emmanuel, and we'll go to the last point and then into interview questions.
Oh, yes. I quickly want to raise this question. Perhaps this is something we can discuss later on. I'm trying to have like a 2x2 matrix about where do you do your research. So this is, we might not talk, I just want to drop this. So you have those in the UK doing studies in the UK, like me. I did my study about banks in the UK, but now I could be in the UK doing a study in Nigeria. Also, you could have somebody in Nigeria who is coming to the UK and trying to do something in the UK or still doing something in Nigeria. So I think that's something we need to, right? So when I say Nigeria, my apologies, in Africa, as in, let's say international, like, you know what I mean? Yeah. So that's something I expect us to discuss, maybe sometimes later, about how, for example, Dr. Nenadi, we see, yes, we did our study in the UK, but we got people that did theirs in Saudi Arabia. We've even got one. She did Alzheimer's in Nigeria, if I can remember correctly. So as a PhD student, please help us. So Pastor Genevieve, help us to bring that as a discussion sometimes, maybe to see, is this, for example, I found it safer to be in the UK and do my research in the UK as a PhD student because I was able to get data. But some people had to travel to Nigeria to go and collect data because they felt my research in Nigeria. But again, I'm with UK. So please help us to think about that. Will I say interconnection? But you know what I mean?
Yes.
About where are you based? And where are you researching? So I try to call it diaspora researchers. Like, okay, I'm in diaspora, but I still do something in Nigeria. But you know what I mean?
I do. And that's a very important one. That's actually very important and very good. It's going to derail our interview conversation, but let's just mention, no, it's really good because it's also about the positioning of research. So I've heard a few things about people saying, well, you don't really live here anymore. You've been away, so you don't have any right to do research or to comment about the country. And then you're like, well, but I am interested, I still have things to do with, and well, I am African, and then you'd have also been maybe African, and then you'd have the context of, well, do you have enough stake to do research in the country you're in, maybe the UK or, the US. So that dilemma is present for the researcher, very, very present for the researcher. Dr. Yinka has come to save us. Okay.
Let me just, I think Dr. Emmanuel has raised a great point, because I think for those who are writing their proposals, this would be something they would have to wrestle with. And it's something that needs to be touched on ever so slightly. I'll say three quick things, and I won't take your time, I promise. I'm timing myself here. First thing is, where do you see yourself after this PhD? Do you see yourself as an expert on your context, continent? How generalizable is what your context brings to the equation? How do you see yourself? So when you finish, you become an expert in this area. Do you want to be an expert in this field, or do you want to be an expert in this field in this context or around areas that struggle with the same challenges within that context? That's something you really want to sort of identify or deal with. In my case, for instance, my passion is Africa. That's always been my passion. So I did my PhD work on Africa. I collected all my data in Nigeria. And that was because I'd always seen myself as someone who was going to build leaders and raise leaders for the continent of Africa. Everything I'm doing is Africa focused. Even now, as I speak to you, I do purely Africa research. It's a risky strategy, but I'm sticking with it because that's always been my strategy. So where are you going? So everything I do on leadership, even though I'm not necessarily a leadership niche specialist, I do a lot of work on leadership, but it's leadership in Africa, number one. Number two, access to data. Like Emmanuel said, like Genevieve mentioned, you could have difficulty of accessing data. And the challenge is, if you have professional links that will get you data in Nigeria, nothing should stop you. In fact, your supervisors will ask you ahead of time, do you have access? So don't start to craft a research agenda for which access to data will become your undoing when the time comes. And then pivoting becomes a very difficult thing, because if you're focusing on a niche area, to pivot becomes incredibly difficult. So if you say you want to study something on Alzheimer's disease, now that is so niche that you must know where you can find either a WhatsApp group where people are talking. Like there was a young lady I was privileged to help out with my brother who had a condition called hemangioma. It's this sort of like this condition on the lip where the lip gets swollen abnormally and so on and so forth. It was through the mom of that child we discovered that there's actually like communities on WhatsApp where mothers with kids with hemangioma gather. So if I was to do a research study on hemangioma as a medical condition, knowing that woman, through her, I can break through into that network, and suddenly I could easily have 80 interviews, 100 interviews. That's access. If I don't have that sort of network and connection, it will become incredibly difficult. Let me say one third final point. Always remember as a PhD as well, there is what I call the strategic dimension to doing a PhD. You see, you will have a lifetime to do the things you want to do for your continent. These 3 years is for you to get the validation that you are an expert that can do that work. So if it means I can suspend my Africa agenda for a second, just to focus on the UK, get my data from the UK, get this PhD, but post PhD, all my work will be Africa focused, so be it. So you can choose. So don't die in Africa because your supervisor is not going to allow you to do a PhD in Africa. You ignore the offer. Don't die there. Come to Europe, get your PhD. You can always do research work on Africa. I was blessed to have been allowed to do my work in Africa, but even if I wasn't, I've always said it, I will do my PhD, carve my own, bend to the will of my supervisors, because they're the ones that could become my undoing. After they validate my knowledge, I will go back and continue with Africa. Then they can't control my career.
Absolutely.
I'm laughing, Dr. Adenka. That was like, yes, do get your 3 years, get your certificate that you're a researcher, then do whatever you like.
I know. No, your PhD is like a driver's license. Once you get your driving license, then you drive your car to wherever. You need to pass and let your driver DVLA give you your certificate. So if you remember from the first talk, and I see Dr. Nenadi's hand, your PhD is personal, is pragmatic, is strategic. You think of it these 3 ways. Where is the strategic? Where is the pragmatic? Where is the personal? How does this align? And then you plot your graph. Get your driver's license and drive your car anywhere. Dr. Nenadi.
Yeah, that was the word I wanted to throw in there, just drawing on from our first conversation about being pragmatic and being the only woman on the panel. Oh, well, in addition to you, I think I want to say also that we have to remember that life will happen. So it's 3 years of living. It's not 3 years of suspending life to do a PhD. So in addition to the strategy that Dr. Adenka has mentioned, I think remember that their life will happen, life will carry on in the 3 years. So, make decisions that you can adopt as you go along, and especially with regards to your data collection and stuff, be quite malleable enough to adapt to whatever life throws at you, just because life will happen, and unfortunately we don't know, we can't predict, even though we might say we have the mind of Christ, and some of us might say that, but you can't predict what will happen in the 3 years. So be very pragmatic and don't be emotionally tied to a particular perspective or a particular idea or a particular strategy. Don't let your emotions get into it, start head first in making those decisions. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Very helpful indeed. So I would ask each panelist a question now. and then I'll open it up for questions. I see a few things in the chat, but I would just ask them questions. And please, I'd want you to answer. They don't have these questions. They don't know. Well, I'm sure they know it because they have answered it at some point in their lives. And I will do it randomly. But I'll ask you interview questions. So you'd either choose to answer as a potential interview student or a candidate, or as you would want somebody to answer. Yeah, ready? How do they do it again? No, technically said no. For that, you're the first person. So why do you want to do a PhD, Dr. Kingsley?
I've already done a PhD.
I know.
That's never mind. That's a tough question. At the time I was asked this question, I think my answers were personal. And I won't answer that question, Jennifer. I'll just tell you what I think the approach should be. I think in answering that question, you shouldn't be scared to make it personal. I don't think you should run away and try and sound all professional, and be like, oh, this is about you should embrace the personal story. For me, there was a very personal story. And so I embraced that personal story. And I think for me, when you get asked that question, you should think about what do they want to hear? What's the point? Why are they asking the question? I think ultimately, when I heard that question, I understood that it was really about testing my commitment to the journey. And so why do you want to do a PhD? The answer should be basically me demonstrating why I will be committed to that 3-year journey. So if it's a personal reason, and it may be that I just want to be called doctor, we'll laugh about it. But if that's my personal reason, then that's what will keep me committed. And so I can, happily say that that's the answer. I don't remember exactly how I answered the question, but I think I had a good mix of professional and personal. Professionally, my answer was, well, I've done a master's thesis in a similar area, and I'm very keen on following through, especially given my background. So before the master's, I'd already done work on law and technology. And then for my master's, I did more law and technology. So part of my professional response was, look, there is something coming in the horizon, cryptocurrency, and I want to be one of the first to investigate that. So that was my professional approach. But I still had a personal story, which is I really want to get the PhD. I've come a long way. I've paid millions of pounds, well, not pounds, millions of naira to do the master's. It would not make sense to go home without the PhD. So that was my personal story. And so I had to embrace that personal story and to say, look, I won't leave here until I get that PhD. And when I get the PhD, then I can go back home. And so that personal story, I think, demonstrated to the department that I was committed to the journey. So I don't know if that answers the question, but that's the way
that's very helpful. Thank you. So yes, remember the personal, the pragmatic, and the strategic. Yes, very. And now he has brought the professional also. So we have 4 that we'll go with. Dr. Moga, your mic is unmuted. Did you want to?
You are going to, is it my turn, right?
No, I have another question for you because you unmuted.
Okay.
That's why I wanted.
Sorry. I guess I was just getting set in case. So my question.
For that, you're number 2. Dr. Okay. Emmanuel, what makes you the right candidate for this PhD?
The right again, going with Dr. Kingsley, I've done my PhD already, so I'm not. I can't imagine doing a second PhD. Yes, but I think what will make you a right candidate is, firstly, I will think about your education background, like what have you been able to achieve, at least. Yes, your first degree, your master's degree, that's some of those things that will be expected. And also, I will bring in your tenacity. Like, yes, what have you been able to do? You can build up on your experience with your master's dissertation, because I think that's an indication of what you are able to do. And also, you can I will expect some personal interest. Yes, why are you the right person for this? Like, okay, what have you done? What are those things perhaps that's in your free time that have given us an indication that you could do it? And also you could bring in some of your interpersonal skills. Yes, in terms of engaging with people, in terms of sharing knowledge, working with people, and also trying to collect information and perhaps your ability to process things. So I think if I was to ask somebody what makes you the right person for this, I will be looking out for those things. Like, yes, your degree, some official indication, your personal interest of what you've done, and also I think your passion, because you don't just want somebody who is so rigid coming in like, yes, I want to do. You want some soft, I don't know how to put it, soft spots. You know what I mean? Like, you are not coming in rigid, like you want to relax, like, okay, this is who I am, and this is what I can bring on board. You've done your research, you know where you are coming into, and also you can demonstrate you fit in. But ultimately, you want to have done your research, because I expect you to tailor your answer based on who is asking you those questions. So you've looked at the university, you've looked at the department, you've looked at what they are doing and how you think your own research can fit in into that evolution.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, so if I'm the interviewer, don't worry, you're getting, yes.
Okay.
So thank you. Thanks, Dr. Emmanuel. Dr. Nenadi, why did you choose this university for your PhD?
Okay, so if you're asked that question, even though you have applied to 5 other universities and literally waiting to see which one takes you, because sometimes that's the case, we have to be quite honest here. Some people are fortunate to be able to find that continuity between undergrad and master's and then PhD, but some people have to search. And so you may have gone to 4 others previously, and that may not necessarily be one choice only. What the interviewer would want to see is that you are, number one, aware of the university, but not just the university as a name, but what does the university stand for? What are their key values? What things have they done? What statements have they made? For example, a university, my university, is currently going through this phase of trying to show that they are racially inclusive. You know, you want to demonstrate that your vision aligns with that vision, or their vision could benefit from your vision in a way that will make for an outcome that will benefit both you and them. So what you need to say, what you need to show is that you know the university, you know what it stands for, you know, and not just know, you can't pretend, because people can see through you, not just that a knowledge of these things, but that your own ideas and your vision align with that of the university. That has to be demonstrable. So you have to be able to fit in into the university as a whole. But also, it's okay to be honest. I'm very, very up for honesty, and it hasn't failed me yet. And so I think I will continue in my life's journey to just opt for the honest truth. If there is a reason why, cost of living, a particular supervisor, proximity to family, whatever reason it is, be honest enough, like Dr. Kingsley said, to identify the professional and the personal. It's okay to have a personal reason for wanting to adopt a particular university. In my case, I had an 18-month-old child. I live in Luton. I couldn't see myself. I considered Leeds or Reading. I couldn't see myself traveling, commuting, which were going to be additional cost to me, being self-funded. And I chose my local university, strategically picked them. I wouldn't necessarily have picked Bedfordshire if I had the luxury of, you know, a pot of money behind me, just saying, what do you want to study? I may have gone somewhere else. But for me, it was because of that. And I tell you, that has paid its dividend. When I was interviewing for my first role, I was asked the question, why this university? And I said, why not this university? And that was something, it really tickled the dean. You know, she felt, I said, I'm a local girl, I live locally and things like that. And it made no sense, Dr. Mokachi will concur. It made no sense me being given that job. I tell you, that's the honest truth. But I got it because of that local connection. Sorry, my phone's ringing on my laptop. I'll stop now and mute myself.
No worries. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Now, Dr. Adeyinka, tell us about your project and what impact this project would make.
That's a great question. And you always would think about research impact, and you must have thought about the impact of your work, and it, in a way, it's tied to the notion of what you're hoping to contribute to knowledge. So it's another way of asking you what's your contribution without you committing to what exactly that contribution will be, but giving us a little bit of a taster into where your mindset or your headspace is in terms of what your research will be doing. So I'll use my PhD as an example. One of the question I chose to answer, even though the question wasn't the exact. So another thing is, at the point of the interview, whatever proposal you submitted will not be what you're going to do for your thesis. Okay, so let's be clear on that. So in a way, don't think that what we're really looking for is your person and your ability to really do the work. In addition to the fact that you have demonstrated. So there are two things. Is either you've done something really interesting, you've put something really interesting out there that we think, wow, this is an exciting topic, and there's a willingness to invest in that topic, or there's that thing of you put something interesting out there, but I'm also sizing you up as a person, and I'm seeing this sort of potential in you being able to do a great piece of work, which comes across through your proposal, by the way. And the interview is just meant to be a validation of my initial assumptions of who you are, what your proposal has said about us. Your proposal is your first picture we see. The interview is what confirms whether that picture is right or wrong, or we need to readjust our assessment of you in a way. So in a way, when we say yes to you in an interview, we also know that your research proposal will change. And I've said that because I just want to tie to my question. So imagine if I said to you that what I'm really trying to unpack in my PhD is to understand how organizations make good people do bad things. That was exactly what my PhD then ended up doing. How do organizations make good people do bad things? And people were like, "Ooh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, why is that right?" Yes, we have a lot of scandals, corporate scandals. They've been going on for decades and decades on end. I could bring it into a personal story. For instance, in where we grew up in Africa, I remember there was a time when there was a Nestle boycott because they told women that breastfeeding was inappropriate and that their own formula was better than breast milk. And so they began to force women who couldn't afford to buy breast milk, who couldn't afford to buy formula, to abandon breastfeeding. So it became a marketing scandal. It became a huge scandal. And I'm saying that someone signed that off. I remember, the story of the Trovan vaccine in Kano, Pfizer, without getting any ethical approval, going there to try Trovan on children suffering from cerebral meningitis. These are things happening in my context. There are other things happening globally. Boris Johnson, for example. We have all these great examples that suggest that people go into organizations, and then I tie it into literature as well. And people go into organizations, albeit well-meaning people, but end up doing really nasty stuff. And that tells me there's something about organizations that we need to unpack that turns angels into monsters. And I'm putting those in emphasis, angels into monsters. What we currently know in this study hasn't given us any sort of credible answer to this question. These are the bits and pieces we know. So what I'm really hoping to do with this is that by answering this question, I'm able to help organizations become better attuned to what aspects of their existence or fabric really turns or has this negative impact on people, but also try to give leaders and leadership a sense of a blueprint of how they can begin to lead more purposefully and deliberately towards, making or raising ethical and moral leaders. That would have been my response to that question. But you can see that I've tied it up to personal, practical, or what you call pragmatic, but also current affairs in a way, and also giving a clear sense of what I think the impact would be. Contribution to theory would be one thing, contribution to practice is another thing. And that would have been my answer to that question.
Please, I hope people like it. Anyway, it's recorded, so you can go back and listen to it. Thank you. So one more round of questions, and then I would open it up. Dr. Kingsley, what challenges do you expect to face during this PhD journey?
I think that's an important question. When I had to answer that question came in probably a different form. I would say one way to think about answering that question, obviously, first of all, is to be honest. When I decided to write on crypto at the time, there wasn't really much there wasn't really much literature. So that was a major challenge for me, is the fact that there isn't any, it's not sufficient literature out there to do the work. So I had to be honest and say, this is a limitation. This is a brand new area of, of law, and it would be difficult to find authoritative sources to use. So that was the first challenge I had, and I had to acknowledge it from the beginning. The second thing I had to highlight as a challenge, and I think Emmanuel highlighted this earlier when he was talking about COVID, my research was a huge risk, because in 2016, yes, crypto was interesting, but nobody knew that by 2019 it would become anything, worth thinking about. So I had to be honest and say, look, this research is so new that I'm not even sure it will outlive the PhD itself. So I had to be honest and say, this is a huge limitation. If crypto becomes this flop, then the PhD will just become another piece of, paper piling up dust on my cupboard. So I had to be honest and say, these are my challenges. Sometimes challenges can be financial, especially if you're self-funded. And I think it's okay to appreciate, to show that you reflected on the challenges. I think ultimately what they want to know is that you take into account some of the challenges you will go through, and you've thought about how you will respond to those challenges. So it's not enough to just say, here are my challenges. It's also, you have to sort of go a step further and say, here's how I intend to deal with those challenges. Yeah. So if I have a challenge with literature, how am I going to do the PhD knowing that that's a huge problem? Am I going to take studies in other disciplines, for instance? Am I going to consider other theories outside of law and tech? So I would say that's the way I answered the question, thinking about, well, what do they really want to know? Because ultimately, I think that question really wants to know whether or not you're ready for the challenges of a PhD, and there will be challenges. So just showing that you reflected on those challenges, and sort of trying to show them that you've thought through a strategy. And obviously, you may not have the right strategy to deal with those challenges, but show them that you've thought about the strategy and that you can, that you have a plan for resolving that challenge. So I don't know if that's the answer. I don't know if you would give me the PhD based on that answer.
Don't worry, I will. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Kingsley. Dr. Emmanuel, are there any areas that you may need training ahead of your PhD?
Oh, yes. As you can imagine, I've never done a PhD before. I don't really know what it really entails, but from my understanding, I will need some training around data analysis. I will need some training around bibliometric and meta-analysis literature review. I will also need some training around basic research methodology. So those are some of those things I will look into. And as I go forward in the research, I'll be looking out for training around presentations, around how to disseminate my work and to improve my public speaking skills, because I should be able to share this research, and also possibly how to engage with policymakers with my research. So those are some of those things I will be looking out for. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Interesting. Okay, Dr. Nnadi, this is for you. What do you plan to do after completing your PhD?
Okay, so I would also add to Emmanuel's question, if you don't mind. Emmanuel's question sounded like someone who has done a PhD. So if you're here thinking, how am I supposed to know all of that before I start the PhD? Don't worry, it's okay to say that there might be areas that you don't know about, because you may not know about meta-analysis and all of that before you start your PhD journey. So it's okay to say, there might be areas that I might need training on that I haven't quite considered yet. What you should be focusing on was, what skills do you currently have, and what skills do you think you might need improving? It doesn't need to sound formal and beautiful as Emmanuel just presented now. Okay, so back to my question. What do you want to do with a PhD? If you're asked this question, I think it is important that you show an understanding of what the current mood is in around your topic or your area of interest. So avoid cliche answers, avoid answering what you think they want to hear. It's very easy for people particularly if you've been on this journey for a while, or if you have been exposed to cowboys, to be able to identify a cowboy answer, and at the risk of, shooting yourself in the foot, avoid looking for answers online. Because when I was going for my interview, I actually found answers to interview questions and I read through them. I had a whole book I read and stuff. It's good to show that you're aware, but you also need to be very careful, because most interviewers will see through any bluff that you're trying to put across. So be clear about your what you're going to do with your PhD will directly be linked to why you're doing your PhD. And so if you present an answer that's disconnected to that, you'll be in trouble. So what you're going to do has to link with why. Your why. What is your motivation? And for some people, and in the last program that we had, first one, we had a participant who his interest was not to read and publish. He just wanted the validation for being an excellent teacher, and that's okay. And you might find that a reviewer disagrees, or a panelist or an interviewer disagrees that you cannot just do a PhD for validation. But I think your why has to link to what you're going to do with it. Avoid the savior mentality. I find if I'm on a panel and anyone says to me they want to improve the condition in Africa, it's an automatic no for me on that question. Not generally, but it's an automatic no for me, because it shows that you have your intentions are purely selfish in a way that's not productive. So avoid trying to make huge changes. And I'm very fierce in my feedback when I'm doing feedback for dissertations, for masters and undergrad. And I say, one of the feedback I wrote very recently was, do you think that with your 10,000 words literature review, you can achieve this claim of changing the process in Ghana? I would like to know who you think you are. I deleted that last bit before hitting send, because that's the sort of rage I get when I see people trying to make up bogus claims to their outcomes of their research. So be very practical. Your answer for what you're going to do with your PhD has to link to the why you're doing your PhD. And therefore, there cannot be one answer. I haven't given one answer because it will be dependent on your why. So be firm about why you're doing it, and that will inform what you're going to do with it. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. If you're on the interview panel, wow, you need to pray. You need to pray. Dr. Adeyinka, this is for you. Is there anything you would like to ask us?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's a great way to get to know your panelists better, who typically might include your potential supervisor. So please don't pass on that question. You can ask about their own experiences about academia. You can ask about their own journeys when they're doing their PhD and what tips they have for you. You can play the card in any direction, but please make it an opportunity to know a little bit more about the reviewers themselves or the university in question. So you can, it could be a simple question. And trust me, when you ask people about their journeys, they're always very generous. And it has a beautiful way of forming a bond between you two already. They just going into the story, and from there, they just sort of, it has a way of totally just breaking all the walls, particularly if it's been a tense interview. So in a way, it's a great opportunity for you to ask questions directly to your supervisor. You could, I didn't get to answer that kind of question, but exciting questions like, what's been your proudest work and why? It makes everyone feel like, oh yeah, my proudest work was actually this study I did, and they get into all the story of it. That's one thing. Another thing could be, what do you expect from a PhD student under your supervision? What are your expectations? And then you begin to get this flavor back, or what does it feel like? What did it feel like for you when you did your PhD? So I just giving you 3 examples. There are dozens more you could possibly ask, but the principle behind it is it's an opportunity for you to either ask questions. So if you have been listening attentively and actively to the conversations between you and your reviewers, it's a good way to pick up on something they said. And a great way to start that question is, I heard you say earlier that. It shows you're listening. X, Y, Z, A, B, C, D. Why is, or what is? Following on a question from what was said is a great way to show that you were fully involved in the interview, or just simply wanting to know more about them or the school, or how it means or what it means to work with them. Those would be my simple answers to that.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. These are all the questions I have. I'm checking the chat. Let me know if there are any other questions you have for our panelists, because I will give them a minute now for last parting comments. And Chinedu has taken immediately. The question didn't even finish. Chinedu, do you want to ask your question? Hello.
Yes. Okay. Am I being heard?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Just a straight question. In choosing topic or in enrolling for PhD program, is it necessary to sometimes put aside your own interests, especially when you are looking for funding, in order to actually get a program that you can have a fund for? So is it necessary sometimes to put aside, probably you have an interest in a particular area, but you are not getting such, area with funds. But then there are other areas where you could easily get a fund for and then do your program. So is it, and most of the times, if you see such area, you may not probably must have gathered some knowledge or any prior knowledge over that field. Is it necessary to sometimes, put aside what you think you should do as a PhD and then go for what you have not done before, just because there is a fund for that? So thank you. That's my question.
All right. Thank you, Chinedu. That is an interesting question. Yes. Who wants to take this on? Kingsley, who did you call? Iman.
I think Emmanuel should take it. He's got great insight. He's got great insight on this.
Why?
No, I will pass it on to Dr. Deyinka. Yes, I've got my reservations when it comes to money. Like, yes. Again, you see, maybe let me quickly just mention this. If the money is there, I think go for where the money is. That's just my selfish, unofficial reason. Like, come on, it saves you the stress. You get your validation, you get your driver's license. When somebody pays you to do that, then you can go ahead and do what you really like. But again, that is just my own personal, underline that, personal opinion. But let's hear what other people think.
Okay. Any other thoughts? I have something entirely different,
Yeah. I would say, if you're not interested, then you will suffer. Why would you put yourself through that? You will suffer. The PhD journey, my goodness. You have to have a commitment to it. If you're not interested at all, Chinedu, run. You have to have some interest. If it's that, it's not exactly, and that's what I'm saying, if you're not interested at all, because if it's something that is different from what you want to research about, but has a sort of umbrella or a link that you could probably make correlations at some point. But if it's something completely, I can't imagine going after funding for a financial research. I would just struggle. I will struggle all through. So
yes,
interest is
Dr. Nenandi,
yeah.
Do you think they will offer the post if they feel it's not capable?
Of course, people are cowboys. People can write, exactly, people can write. I can write a proposal and I can talk the talk. I can read around and talk the talk. I can plan. I teach health and social care. I'm a lawyer for context, So, people can educate themselves to do something.
Absolutely.
Can I just say, I think this is a very interesting question, because sometimes you apply for a PhD and you have to join a group. There's another example of this, where you have to join a group that's already researching on a topic, and that group has funding, but and you need to join that group. So I think it's for me, the question I would ask immediately is, why can you not become interested in something new? Because I did my PhD, for instance, in crypto, and now I'm looking at AI and metaverse. Like, why can you not? I'm not challenging you, Chinedu. I'm just saying, think about it. If you have interest in one area, do you think you can have interest in another area? Especially like Emmanuel said, being strategic here. If someone's going to pay you to do the PhD, for some of us who did our PhD self-funded, anybody who gives me money to do a PhD, being honest, if I need to do that PhD, I will find a way
I know, but 3 years is too much to do something that
you don't
like 3 years. So it's different if we're talking about, so I started out as a journalist, and then if we're talking about things that are slightly related, there's journalism, there's advertising, there's PR, they are interrelated. But if you then bring in crypto, I wouldn't do it for 3 years, because it's like, why? And I feel like with the PhD journey, it can be unpredictable at times, and it takes a lot on your mental health for you not to just hinge that decision solely on finance. And you've put a lot of things on hold. So you then, so for me, I encourage my students, do something you're passionate about. So even if when you're paying for it yourself, it's something you want to do. You've seen the future. There's a strategic plan ahead that you can use it for. But if you go into, let's say, dance or creative arts because there is funding, well, that's me. So, yeah. So for me, I'm like, no. The funding I don't think it's enough to put you through 3 years of doing something, unless you're happy with it, unless you want to do it. That is for me. Dr. Inga, had your hand up? Okay.
Yeah, I did, but I agree. So for Chinedu, there are two perspectives you've received here, but there's one thing that connects both perspectives together: interest. If you get funding for something you're not interested in, it will become your undoing. And that leads me to my second point. Do you have the capacity to do the work? Because what Kingsley said about exploring new fields is also valid. So in a way, you're not meant to sort of curtail yourself and say, I'm a nutritionist and I'm going to do my PhD only in nutrition. Apologies, is it Josephine? If I'm picking up on your field, I mean, you could do something in another field that is science related, that you have transferable skills for, that you could do, as long as it's something of interest to you. But you have to be ready to do the work. You have to be committed to reading up and getting all that work done. That's one. And finally, Chinedu, is that perhaps you need to speak to somebody. Your question is cryptic, and I sense you probably want to do something. You're about making that decision because you are in that space, or you know someone who is about to make that decision. And I'll say to you, Chinedu, one of the other things you want to do is to be careful that you don't leave your zone where you really feel passionate about, because you are not positioning yourself well enough in that space. So there is positioning even within fields. So for instance, if you're doing work on SDGs, for example, the SDG field, Sustainable Development Goal field, is so broad and things have moved on that there are now what we call frontier agendas in that space. If you are positioning yourself still on some very irrelevant now, not that it's irrelevant, but not very quite interesting thing on poverty eradication in women. Someone might even begin to challenge you. Why are you talking about poverty eradication in women? We're not talking about poverty reduction, because it's two different things. When you say you want to eradicate poverty and you're saying to me, I want to reduce poverty. And so if you're saying, I want to eradicate poverty, and that's what you built your research on, and they say, oh my goodness, I'm not getting money. You just need a bit of guidance to make sure that you are positioning yourself well in your current space. If for any reason that's not working, even if you have to pivot to another zone of knowledge or another realm of knowledge, let it be that there is some remote link. It might be a weak link, but at least a link enough that would elicit your interest and commitment and dedication to reading, doing the work, and growing.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Oh, I see Victor, and then I see, let's take Victor, and then Dr. Emmanuel comes in. We'll then wrap up with this. Yes, Victor?
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Actually, my question is just a layer to what the last question was. And currently I'm just about to finish my master's, and there's a lot of, we have like a studentship program which you have to join to a bigger project, and it sounds very interesting and very juicy because it's a European Union program. But the thing is, I don't know how best can you navigate around the restrictions in terms of your findings, because there are, you will sign a contract, and then you will have either ownership of certain things to publish or to lay, I mean, some things that you can have to yourself or to the project. So it's really dicey, and a couple of my colleagues rejected because I mean, they kind of like found it's like it's too I mean, they're funding you, but you cannot have ownership of what you're going to probably end up researching on.
So let me add a bit more context to it, because you studied architecture, if I remember, and you're moving to artificial intelligence, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So who wants to help? Now you can see with Emmanuel, intellectual property issues, with Chinedu laid the foundation, but he wasn't a bit more specific. Victor is now being slightly specific with I see people have unmuted. Yeah. Victor, are you done so that we can then jump in?
Yeah, I want to know how to navigate, I mean, based on your experiences, how best can one navigate around these things, and just your advice on it. And I think it can really help myself and any other person that is in between this situation.
Absolutely.
And I have other questions, but can I just put all of them out just to save time?
Might as well, since you're speaking. Yeah, please do.
Yes. So my question is about interlacing disciplinary proposals, because I have like 3 layers of training. I train as an architect. I did a master's in sustainability. I'm doing digital construction, and I'm thinking of putting out my PhD proposal, connecting all of this to AI in computational designing. So what is the dangers of interlacing all of this? And because there's an emphasis on, you know, not putting too much, don't put things too wide and don't put things too narrow, and trying to stay in the middle. So this is so that disciplinary interlacing, is it good, or what is the dangers, or how can one navigate that as well? Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Victor. Very important questions. Right. Thank you for that. So I have the panel members. Yes, please.
If I can start, we want to start from the closing answer to Victor, and then I join you with this, because I think here we've got 2 things that is going on. We've got the money bit and we've got the interest. So it's about recognizing the form and function. I'm sure Victor can recognize about what do you really want to do. And I align well with Dr. Kingsley about doing something new. But again, I'm very mindful about what Dr. Nenadi was saying about cowboys. But I believe if you are making that decision about who wants to pay you for what, you have that conviction that, am I really doing this for money, or am I just doing this because I can I can really do it. For example, in my own case, if I have somebody to fund me for something within business, within advertising, within that area, I could, you see, how would I put it, switch myself to fitting into that. So it moves away from my own personal interest in advertising, but because, wow, this is something I'm getting, I will be able to fit myself into that. So I think even though the money is flying around, that is still a personal decision to say, okay, is this a place I can fit in? You can't give me money to do research in social sciences or in bio something that I want to go. So I think that is something I would like to clarify. Okay. So even though the money is there, you want to find out how far is it moving away from your own interest, and how far can you take it. And this will lead me to trying to answer the first question of Victor. Again, this is about he who pays the pipers dictates the tune. So you want to recognize that there are some strings attached to those money that you've been offered. So if you can't deal with those strings, look for somebody else that will give you the money that will not have so much strings. But also you need to recognize that being in that network, it's an advantage. Because Dr. Adenka will say, where would you see yourself after these 3 years? Being in that network could be an advantage for you, but also this is something you need to weigh up. Do you have alternative source of finances? So if other people are pulling out of this, are they pulling out because they've got somebody else to fund them? So that's something you also want to reflect on, Victor. Like, okay, if I pull out of this because of these strings that is attached, do I have an alternative? And if I'm staying in this place, can I really survive? You can get your driver's license, you can do whatever you want to do, give it to them in that 3 years and go on and do what you want to do. But do you believe that what you are going to get in that 3 years, it's something that can make you another Bill Gates? And you want to really take that out and go and find somebody to do it for you, to fund you. So I think it's about finding the balance between being pulled to do what you want to, what the group wants you to do, or going out to do what you want to do, but finding an alternative source of income. And for the last question, I think you seem to answer that question is about knowing your target area. You've got 3 things that are going on around. It might be very difficult to find somebody that will supervise you across all the multidisciplinary, all those 3 areas. So I will advise you might want to stay in architecture, then find how other things applies to what you are doing in architecture, because it's easier for you to dig deep in an area that you feel more comfortable and use other skills or other discipline. But if you want to go wide, I'm thinking it might be difficult to get the right person or the right team to supervise you across all those different areas. But if you have somebody in architecture that is supervising you, you can bring in skills from other places to support you in that one place. So I would advise, have a base, then use other sources or other disciplines to boost your PhD. That would be all for me. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Emmanuel. Dr. Adeyinka, do you want to pick this up?
Apologies, Nenadi, that I'm jumping into your time because I know you had your time up. You wanted to say something, but apologies.
Actually, what I wanted to say was I wanted to suggest you answer the first question. That's why I turned my thing off immediately. I can't give some insight to the second question, but I was going to recommend you take the first question.
Okay, thanks, Nenadi, for that. I'm going to try and take both because there was also a question by Millicent in the chat, which I think maybe my response will address. Was it Victor who asked the first question?
Yeah.
This body of questions. Victor, check with your university, whichever university you're trying to get into. There is a possibility at times to have joint supervisions by authorities from different fields of interest. So think of divergence and convergence. Divergence meaning that both fields maintain their integrity, but convergence because there has to be a bridge that connects both fields together. So in a way, you can have joint supervision, say in your architecture, and then have another person who is a specialist in AI, who will both of them supervise you and bring specific uniquenesses. Now, it has its technicalities in terms of managing the sort of dynamic, but it's not impossible. And I say that because I know of a student who did some work, that was looking at something around ethical or moral decision making, but was looking at it from a neuroscientific point of view. What's going on in your head when you're making ethical decisions? So they did have somebody in my department who was an ethicist by profession, and who does a lot of work in ethics and philosophy of ethics. And I was privileged to be a part of that work. But then they had a second supervisor who was a neuroscientist from the Department of Neuroscience, who was then sort of seconding. So they were bringing all that technical flair to it. So in a way, neuroscience became like a lens through which we understood morality better. So neuroscience and neuroscientific methodology was being adopted to understand what would have ordinarily been a purely philosophical concept. And that was such a fantastic contribution, because then there were so many interesting things that emerged from that. So the doors are not shut to you completely in terms of your interdisciplinary adventure and endeavor. There's another thing I'll say very quickly to you. Is there literature, or what literature or literatures are you trying to make contributions to? Because that's also very critical. You want to identify those literatures and see if there is anything that has been done to link both of them together in a way to create another layer of convergence. So picking up on what Dr. Emmanuel graciously mentioned, in case that joint supervision adventure were not to be possible, maybe because your university where you're intending to do the work don't have some specialists in these areas who can supervise you, one thing you can then do is to ask yourself the very difficult question: what literature am I contributing to? And the interdisciplinary component of it can still come in through the methodology you adopt, or through some of the other work you do around where you collect your data, how you design the work, and so on and so forth. So those are things. I mean, I'm answering this in very quick time, but I mean, I hope they just help you through all of this. Now, back to your very first question, which is quite an interesting one. Is that you're right to have understood the terms of the research endeavor and the intellectual property rights that come with it. Victor, let me quickly say something to you, and this is very true, and I know my colleagues would agree with me. How many PhDs have actually ended up doing stuff with their PhD thesis or publishing out of their PhD thesis? Dr. Emmanuel said it the last time, that many people publish their thesis and they just leave it on a shelf to rot away. Very few people, well now, except now, Victor, there are a few people, quite a lot of universities are encouraging people to do their PhDs by paper, published papers. So you publish 3 papers and then you do a summary that brings all 3 together. Apart from those kind of, publication by paper, if you're doing publication by thesis, however, we have situations where people do all of this great work and that great work just sits on the shelf somewhere. So yes, you own the intellectual property that you're not sharing with the world. That's a very extreme answer to give to you, because I'm literally almost just saying to you that from a strategic point of view, if you were remotely convinced to take that offer, you could take the offer knowing, again, as we've been saying, validates you with a PhD, but then you can take that transferable skill to then build your research from ground up, which is exactly what a lot of people are doing in academia, because people just get excited about new fields and they forget what they've done in their PhD and they're doing something related or something entirely new. And no one is going to question them because we know that they've got a PhD. That's one answer, one way to look at it. The other way to look at it is that from an IP point of view, clarity on what you own and what you don't own is very important in everything that we do. And where that takes us to is what Emmanuel said, where you can either ask the Secretariat for more, you can engage with the Secretariat involved in this, or find someone. You're dealing with the bureaucracy. So you might need to find somebody whom you need to speak to who has either done a similar PhD or someone who can walk you through some of the concerns you may have. For instance, there are benefits to those things that you may not immediately notice or spot unless someone were to talk you through it. A benefit of that might be finishing your PhD, you get consultancy roles. So accept your strategies. I want to finish this PhD and become an academic, which means by default, I want to be publishing, even though I've given you a panacea to that in a way. Another way to look at it is I finished my PhD and I can become absorbed by the European Union Commission and other international agencies into doing consultancy work off the back of this great piece of research that I've done for my PhD. And also, like Emmanuel said, there's also the access to networks and other benefits that you may get. So in a way, you have to do a cost benefit analysis and weigh your options, but please don't be myopic. And secondly, don't shut the door thinking it's a no because you don't understand the fullness of the benefit. And that's why I think you need someone to walk you through it. Apologies at this point, I'll have to take my leave. I just wanted to thank you all, then Genevieve and Mary and the team for having me, and to the highly esteemed panelists for having me. I'll take a bow here, but I know the conversation will continue. And I just want to say thank you and see you all again soon.
Thank you very much, Dr. Adeyinka, for your time. He has other engagements. Thank you. And actually, we are slightly over time, so we will be rounding up now. Thank you to all the panelists, the questions. I see the questions. We will take some more questions on LinkedIn, post the responses, the link, the YouTube link, and the LinkedIn link is in the chat. So please follow, we'll post the responses there, because we know that most of our panelists would also send some more responses to us. So please do follow the network, do follow them. We have a webinar planned in September. We'll share more information with you as we go on. Dr. Moga, do you any last words? I see you are unmuted.
Yes, no last word, but I guess it's just to remind. Okay, my last word for today is just to remind our prospective PhD student that PhD is very interesting. It is enjoyable, especially if you do something that you like. So please don't be discouraged. Yes, people have done it. People will continue to do PhD. So this is not a very difficult journey, but be aware of the challenges. Yes, especially from funding. Yes, that's something we always be talking about. From your supervisors, from your family members, telling you are just sitting on that chair all day. What are you doing? Won't you come and eat dinner? Yes, those things are part of it. But I think I've done it and I've enjoyed it. I've reaped the reward, but I won't do it again. So, but so far it's been an experiment which I will not discourage anybody from doing. If you want to do it, please go ahead and do it, but be mindful of the limitations. But I'm sure you will all be fine. Thank you so much. Thank you, Pastor Genevieve, for this opportunity and to really engage with. It's been a pleasure sharing this platform with everybody. Hopefully next time we will see ourselves face to face. Next time.
That we are planning a conference at some point. We will have a conference. It will be amazing. Thank you, Dr. Emmanuel. Okay, so Dr. Nenadi, any?
Yeah, so thank you. And I just wanted to add a quick note to Victor about the interdisciplinary interlacing. As Dr. Adeyinka said, it's definitely worth considering. Personally, I sort of had a problematic experience because of my supervisor, my main supervisor, fell ill. And so I was given to someone who had no idea of the area. So my research had to change. So I would still recommend it because it's definitely worth it. But I think I would give you this advice beforehand. Is just bear in mind that life could happen and changes could occur. So make sure that you are planning for that, not planning for that, but that you're aware of that, and that things may slightly change and things may, and also to just recommend that you stay very grounded, because of my experience, it made me feel lost. And so I haven't really taken a side on criminology or youth justice or social policy since my PhD. So use my experience to develop your confidence to keep at it until you feel comfortable enough for where you sit more comfortably. So it's challenging, but it's possible. I think it's needed because we need to demystify academia. and research and all of that. You will make an amazing researcher. I know that. So go for it, but just be conscious of the challenges that you may find. Thank you to everyone who's listened. We don't take for granted that you actually see words as necessary or essential to your journey, and the sky really is the limit if you have the mind and you set the mind. Thank you for Dr. Genevieve for your perseverance in doing this act of service, and I really just want to say thank you to everybody.
Thank you very much, and for waking up early. You're in America. Thank you.
That's okay. My kids are already awake and they're rotating between thumbs up and well done, mommy. I think they're quite impressed to hear me speak.
Oh, that's lovely. Okay, Dr. Kingsley.
Yes, thank you very much. I want, well, on a slightly lighter note, I wanted to actually ask you, Genevieve, when did you become a pastor?
Oh my God.
Okay, we'll talk about that later anyways. Final words. I think for me, the final word would be, for anyone considering a PhD is, for me, it's been a life changer. So it's changed my life. And so I will never tell you not to do a PhD, even if, regardless of all the challenges, I would just say, there's always going to be a way. For me personally, PhD transformed my life. So for me, it's the gift. Anyone who wants to do a PhD, please pursue it. But one thing I will say as a final word is be very clear on what value that PhD will add to you. Before you take on any of those sort of complex issues, be clear, what is the value of this PhD to me as a person? And I think once you've identified how valuable that PhD is to you, that will then inspire you to do the different things or to tackle the different problems you might encounter. So whether it's funding, whether it's intellectual property issues, whether it's, the type of research or the area of research, I think once you've identified how valuable the PhD will be to you, then that will drive all the remainder of the journey. So that's, I guess, my final word, and then we'll come back and talk about the pastor thing. But thank you so much, Genevieve, for having us on. I've really had a good time. Someone was asking me today when I was speaking about the event, and they said, "How much are you getting paid?" I was like, "No, it's free." So maybe this is something we can talk about. Yeah.
Don't worry, we'll talk off camera.
No, there's always free service in academia, Kingsley. Please don't raise that conversation.
No. Emmanuel, this is a light note. Calm down. I know you want to pay me, Emmanuel, personally. I'll send you my account details. No problem.
Okay, no, thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, the panelists. Thank you, Dr. Kingsley, Dr. Nenadi, Dr. Emmanuel, Dr. Adeyinka. Thank you for your time. Thank you to everyone that has participated today, that is listening. Your research project is something you invest a lot of time in. So make sure it's something that arouses your interest and passion. Thank you to the African PhD Scholar Network team, Mary Okam, Pinel Orioye, Rosaline Ehiabi, and Lanre Aino. Thank you so much for your time, for your effort. Please do follow us on social media. Please do stay in touch, and we will let you know the next events, which it should be a workshop, so you'll do hands-on experiences and all that.